Core HCM or Global HCM Functional Training. We welcome all the participants. We have close to 10 participants for this training, and we welcome you all. To be good morning, good evening to wherever you are joining from. So the objective of this training is to give you an in-depth coverage of the Core HCM module. So there will be a lot of hands-on activities that you'll be performing. A lot of assignments will be given. So today's session is more on the introduction side. So if you have previously not worked with Fusion, so we are going to make yourself familiar with the Fusion product. I'm going to talk a little bit about the product itself, how the product changed over a period of time. So that's the agenda for today's session. So before we start, I would just like to get some introductions of the participants. So if you can just unmute yourself, and I can actually, call out the names. That way it will be easier, so we don't start talking, together. So let's start with Ajay with alphabetical order. So Ajay, if you can just introduce yourself, your background, so I know that whether you're PeopleSoft, EBS, how many of you are PeopleSoft or EBS or any other technology. If you have previously worked with Fusion, so it's good that we know what the team comprises of. So Ajay, if you can introduce yourself. So before we even get into the Fusion area, Fusion HCM training, we're going to talk a little bit, this is a few minutes about ERP Web Tutor. If you have not done any courses before, I know that there are some people who have attended some of the ERP Web Tutor self-paced courses before. So this is what we did. So we started in 2012 as primarily as a video blogging site. And since then, we have created over 500 hours of content. And we have trained over 5,000 students. The content, that 500 hours of content, is not just the live training. The majority of it is actually self-paced content recorded. So that's a significant effort that we have put in to create the content. We do have visitors from over 130 countries, so we have pretty much reached most of the countries in the world. And believe it or not, we have helped students coming from different backgrounds, completely non-ERP backgrounds, and helped them succeed in Oracle ERP areas. So we really feel proud about being able to help people change their career path. And we will continue to do this. We'll continue to innovate and motivate people with one and only one objective, is that we will never compromise on quality. So if you have seen our videos, if you have attended any of our sessions before, we try to do the best to maintain the top quality content. Okay. So that's about ERP Web Tutor. And with that, we can start with our day one agenda. So the day one agenda is a little bit light. We are definitely going to see the application, especially for students who are going to see the applications for the first time, get hands-on. You might have seen it on some of the Oracle promotional videos. You might have accessed it in Oracle demos, but we will go into the application, try to understand the architecture, different deployment options, and the starting point for all configurations, which is the functional setup manager. So this is our agenda for today's session. And we will try to pace it, like I said, for everybody. If you want to speed me up or if you want to slow me down, please chat and let me know so we can pace the content accordingly. Okay? Okay. So we're going to start with the introduction to Fusion Core HCM. So that's what Fusion Core HCM or HCM Cloud, it started in October 2011, and with the market heavily dominated by SAP, Workday was already in the market by then, the first the most successful cloud HCM product at that time. There was Microsoft, and then there was an in-house breed of Oracle's own products. So most of you have worked on one of those. So eBusiness Suite was already there, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, Siebel. So these were all there in the market when Fusion was launched. Okay, so it started in 2011, so it's been a while. And when the product was launched in release 1 and 2, the product was definitely had a lot of limitations. So there has been a significant amount of improvement and effort on Oracle side to make improvements to the product. It's completely built from ground up using the latest technologies and open standards like Java, Beeple, SOA architecture. So if you have worked on EBS, you must have heard a lot of complaints regarding launching the forms from different clients, that you have to install the JInitiator, that the Java plugin has to run in the background in order to launch the forms. So a lot of clients have a lot of complaints regarding that, especially the user interface. I have used EBS for a long time. The product was pretty good, but I think from a modern standpoint, with all the smartphones and everything going to the web and open standards, EBS was definitely behind. But it's definitely one of a very strong product, along with PeopleSoft. I don't know much about PeopleSoft, but what I heard from other consultants, that it's a solid HR product. So now we have completely open standard. Everything is on the web. It is compatible on your tablets, smartphones, though they are also coming with some apps so that the experience is improved. But now, since it is everything is browser based, you can pretty much perform most of the transactions from your mobile phone or tablet, especially time entry, absence request, the self-service activities as such. So some of the ideas that Oracle had when they launched this product is to set very high standard of innovation, high standard for global workforce. Things are changing so fast in modern corporate world, so they had to come up with something that's pretty high standard, and definitely they came up with a very intuitive user interface for a seamless transition and adoption. Any ERP product, when it gets launched, or any client that, if you have worked with different clients on your either PeopleSoft or EBS implementation, it is always a challenge to get that acceptance level from the users. So far what I've seen with Fusion, I myself started working in Fusion when in release 1, and then did not work on it until release 6. So release 1 definitely a lot of limitations, but now with release 11 and 12 is already there in the market, the user acceptance and adoption rate is very high. Especially it's a challenge to convince users coming from EBS. So functionality wise, Fusion has pretty much caught up with the functionalities that PeopleSoft or EBS had to offer. So over a period of time that has happened, but I think where the best response that we get is the user interface and how easy it is to navigate within the application. And that's something that we will see today actually. So Fusion HCM Cloud was originally launched. So in 2011, there was only Fusion HCM Cloud, and there was no financials, there was no supply chain modules, and then some of the other modules like PBCS, which is for planning and budgeting. So those were launched later. So Fusion HCM Cloud was the first product from the Fusion Cloud house. So, and that's probably the most stable and the most developed product in the suite. Fusion ERP is definitely picking up. So if somebody has interest in Fusion ERP, so then that's something that we can definitely start at this point. But Fusion Cloud, most of the implementations are happening on Fusion Cloud. There are already ERP implementations is picking up. SCM, what I have heard, is still lagging behind a little bit. Okay. Now, offered primarily as a software as a service model or a SaaS model. Okay. Now, in EBS, there was no SaaS model. There was so you used to have different companies that could do the hosting for you. But I have not worked with any client in EBS that had something like Oracle is hosting and they're paying on a subscription basis. So most of the cases, the client would have their own hosting, own hardware, or if they can outsource that to some other partners. Okay. So that's what has happened with HCM Cloud. So we can see that in the last 6 years or so, Oracle, so this is the number, I mean, what I heard last is that they have crossed 1,500 customers. Now that's a significant number. Definitely some of the customers they started with were probably very small scale customers, but now when I look at the list of customers that they have, you can see some of the big names. We have Pinterest, GE, IBM, Pella, Windows. So this tells me that there are some pretty big clients. Besides, we have also started, Oracle has started implementing for Ford Motors. So that's a huge implementation. They have Alcoa, which is again a huge, AT&T. So these are implementations that I know that are happening. So that tells me that the big customers have started adopting Fusion. And even, maybe a couple of years back, I would say that the product was not really ready for this big customers. But now definitely, apart from, I would say, the payroll module, it's still, there are some improvements left there. But the global HCM, compensation, talent, definitely the product is ready to cater to large customers. Okay. Now, the modern looks that we talked about. So compare this with your EBS or PeopleSoft. I mean, I only use PeopleSoft for my expense report, so that's my only familiarity with PeopleSoft. So, but I know EBS, I know the self-service was there, the forms was there, but look at how it looks now. So if you haven't looked at the latest environments, this is how Fusion looks. It's pretty slick and modern. Okay, so we have talked about how Fusion's journey has been so far, how it looks, and now let's take a look at the deployment options, which is more from our interest, that from an implementation perspective. So we have 3 deployment options. So one is the private cloud, a public cloud, and the on-premise. Okay, so the most common of all of these is the public cloud, where you have the data center and different companies can have their instance hosted in that data center and they are accessing the application. Now, on-premise, so far what I know is there are, based on, to the best of my knowledge, there are 2 organizations that's using the on-premise. Now that on-premise is run by Oracle. So it's pretty much virtually the same as what a SaaS model would be, where Oracle is hosting and maintaining. So instead of hosting and maintaining it in Oracle's premises, they are maintaining it in the customer's premise. So that's the on-premise concept. But it's very difficult. Overall, the architecture is fairly complicated. Not many resources have the capability and even the hardware to maintain everything on-premise. So this is probably going to be coming up at some point, especially some of the bigger customers. They still prefer to have the data hosted in-house, maybe more from a security standpoint. So that's going to come eventually in the future, but the way things are moving in the cloud and the way Fusion works right now, it's pretty good on how the SaaS model is working, and probably that's where Oracle's focus is, to keep it that way. So public cloud, so we talked about that, so I'm not going to spend time on these. You can read these at your the slides and the deck will be distributed, so you can read some more details about the different deployment options. Now, this is what I would like to spend some time, which is the Fusion architecture. So if you have come from an EBS background, you know that you have your Oracle applications where you have the forms and everything, and you have tools like workflow, and then you have your database, in Oracle database, where you can create different objects. That's how you keep and maintain the Oracle applications. Now Fusion has a significantly distributed architecture. So if I look at this, it's a cloud architecture. At the heart of this architecture, we have the functional setup manager. Okay, so the functional setup manager is the main configuration area. This is where we are going to do most of our configurations. So just want to start writing a little bit here. So if you think of this as your let's say if you're coming from PeopleSoft, where you define all the configurations. So this is all configurations area. So if you're coming from e-business suite, you know that you had your workforce structures, you could define your department, jobs, employee maintenance, all that configurations reside in this functional setup manager or FSM area. Okay. Now, apart from that, you also have these 4 other areas. So these are completely different architecture or different components where the configurations reside. Okay. So your OIM, which is the Oracle Identity Management, so this was primarily this was used primarily for your hosting all the employee user accounts. Okay, not just employee, that could be other user accounts as well. So this is where you're going to see all the user accounts are maintained. Now in EBS, I don't know about PeopleSoft, in EBS, everything was in that Oracle applications area itself. There was no separate place for storing the user accounts. So now we have this OIM area which actually stores the user accounts. Okay. The second area is a SOAR BPL, which is used for designing the approvals. Now in EBS, you had something called AME and you had something called workflow. So if you're coming from that background, I'm not sure about PeopleSoft, but they were all housed within the applications. So it all resided within the same URL, everything was the same. Now here you will see that things are different. Now then we have the Oracle BI reporting options. You also have the content management server. So the content management. So when you upload files, this is where they reside. Okay, so that's another area. Now what Oracle is trying to do is when they first launched, then everything was kind of distributed, and we will actually go and see all of these areas, and we will also see how things are changing, how Oracle is trying to put everything in this functional setup manager area. Even though the data is actually being stored in these different chambers in the cloud, you will get a UI to configure most of it from the functional setup manager area. Now, the problem is with this architecture, that's when Fusion first started, when things reside in a different box, let's say in this cloud, different box. So there has to be a constant sync, because this is the area that is primarily used by users, end users, HR super users. So anything that you do here, or the reporting or OTBI, so all of that needs to be synced, has to be synced with the functional setup manager, because that's my area where the end user is doing their transactions, okay? And they don't care about how the approval is designed. They want to make sure that when they initiate a transaction, the approval process is correct. So there were some processes that would sync these configuration items that resided in these different areas, okay? And then you also had something called an authorization policy manager. So this is something similar to your responsibility and function customization that existed in EBS. And again, since I know EBS, I'm better able to relate the configurations and changes with EBS. So if anybody has to add something on the things that change in PeopleSoft and how it used to be in PeopleSoft, and share your knowledge, that would help the entire team. So again, this authorization policy manager was there, and it was a very cumbersome and difficult process to customize the roles. So we will talk about roles. Everything in Fusion is role-based, which is the same as responsibility in EBS. I'm not sure what's the terminology in PeopleSoft, but in EBS, it's the responsibility. So if you get your HR responsibility to perform HR-related tasks, you have your employee line manager responsibilities to be able to manage those tasks. And some of those responsibilities come with a lot of functionalities, but you can remove certain functions if the client doesn't want to do it. So let's say new hire. By default, a line manager is able to perform a new hire, but very few companies actually allow the line managers to perform new hires. So that's some kind of a responsibility customization, or limiting the capabilities of the delivered roles. And that kind of customizations are done using this authorization policy manager. It used to be done. So now, and that was a very difficult and cumbersome task. So with release 12, in release 9, Oracle came up with something called Security Console. I don't know what's happening here. So they came up with something called Security Console. And we're going to see that. So Security Console is more of an user, so user can see what is happening. It's a much improved UI, makes it fairly easy for the configuration team to remove certain functionalities that comes delivered within a role. It can be an employee role, it can be a line manager role or HR role, compensation, talent, doesn't matter what, but this is where you go and modify or customize the roles, removing or adding any functionalities that you want within that role. So same as what you can remove functions and menus from responsibilities, you can add if something is needed for a specific responsibility. So this is what it does. Okay. So we will be using release 11. So we have already requested Oracle to send for the patching and upgrading to our instance to release 12. Everything happens through a patch, and it takes some time to get that upgrade scheduled. So, so right now the environment is in release 11. Okay. Okay. But we have access, that the team will have access to the environment for 90 days. We are almost certain that we will have the instance upgraded to release 12 by then. So you will definitely have, you'll have access to release 11 now, and then over a period of time it's going to upgrade and you'll have access to release 12 as well. Does that answer your question, Lakshmi? Okay, so now, sure. So now let's take a look at some of the questions that has been posted so far. So these are called roles in PeopleSoft. Mani has confirmed that these are called roles. So I think that's the term that Fusion is using. So Fusion, like as the term suggests, it's a fusion between EBS, PeopleSoft, JD Edwards, but I would say it's 70% EBS, 20% PeopleSoft, and 10% new and the rest, new concepts and the rest. Okay. So I have a question from Yaz saying that the functional setup manager, is it equivalent to the seeded responsibility legislation super HRMS? No, it's more than that. The functional setup manager is the place where you can perform not only super HRMS manager, you can even do flex fields, you can do value sets. So keep in mind that those were either in the application developer or system administrator responsibility, and whatever the corresponding roles that existed in PeopleSoft. So this is a lot more than that. It's the complete configuration area. Okay, and that's why I said that this user management, role customizations, approval configurations, things are all moving to this functional setup manager area. So it's like AME, application developer, system administrator, all combined. Make sense? Okay. So that's the Fusion architecture. And like I said, this security console is the primary place right now. OIM, which is this area, Oracle Identity Management, we will see that today. This is where you maintain the user accounts and everything, assign roles to user. That's going to be restricted in release 12. So once we get the upgrade, you will not be able to even access Oracle Identity Management area. Okay. Okay. So now we have talked about the different architecture. We are going to take a first look at the Fusion applications, and we will see how to navigate to different areas, so and how the application looks. Who would have access to, so there would be some, the super admins, they would have access to the OIM area, but whatever you can do in OIM will be made available in the security console. So you will, I think what's going to happen is, what I've seen in some of the demos, that when you have that IT security manager role, so let's take a look at the applications, and I think some of your questions would be answered. Okay. Okay, so now here we are in the applications. So I'm going to log in as this account called IMPL admin, and we will be distributing the login credentials that you're going to use at least for today's exercise. So I'm going to log in, and this is where you can have different language pack. This is pretty much very much similar to EBS. You could select the language pack. And what I've seen is in release 12, the sign-on screen looks slightly different. So if you have seen some of the Oracle demo environment, you would notice that it looks slightly different. The login screen has a little bit different look and feel. So that's what I've seen so far. So now, here we have two login pages, like home pages. So before this used to be the home page, and now this has become a dashboard page. Okay, the new home page, when you click on home, this is how the new home page looks like. Okay, and the home page, you can see that we have changed the background, we have changed the logo to make it change the look and feel, and this is something that your customers are going to request for, to make it more personalized for their users' experience. Okay, so we have a question. Let me see. Is it compliant with all browsers including Mac Safari? Yes. So I have tested this in Chrome, Edge, Internet Explorer. I have also used it in Firefox, Safari, in tablets, smartphone as well, but I did not even, I mean, the screen has so many fields, it's probably, especially for the configuration aspect, you would not enjoy the experience on a phone, but definitely on a tablet, and yes, Mac Safari too. But they have something called Tap, which is some small applications that can be installed on, especially for employees, and they can do certain tasks like time entry, absence request. So that's more like an app kind of experience. Okay, so this is how the home page looks like, and this is the setup and maintenance is what I was referring to as your functional setup manager area. Okay, so this page and everything that you are seeing, this is on the left hand side, you are seeing the navigator, and depending on the roles that you have everything in one place. Okay, now if you have worked on EBS, you would know that at any given point of time you are under one responsibility, and whatever restrictions or data security is imposed on that responsibility, it gets imposed on the user as well. But here you can see that I can see benefits, I can see payroll, I can see this is my workforce, I would say this is the core HR area. I can run reports, and this is the security console that I was referring to. You will see that. And also these are some of the other configuration areas for some of the other modules, the contract management, sales, and all that. Okay, cash management, fixed assets. So everything is in one place. Okay. Now what we normally do is everything is task based. So let's try to relate some of the tasks that we used to perform in our other ERP products. So we can do that using this setup and maintenance area. Okay. When the instance gets provisioned, when you first time see the environment, nothing has been done. Of course, this environment has certain configurations. So let's start with how you're going to first proceed with your initial implementations, and considering the fact that there is nothing that exists in the application. Okay, so you get the URL, you get your login, and you log in for the first time. And again, this is something that whoever does it once, it's done for that application. You cannot do it over and over. It's not that it's based on the user. So you first go in and go to your setup and maintenance tile. So these are called the tiles. Let me take a step back. So these are the tiles, and these are called Infolets. So you can see this about me that has this little bursting squares. So these are called Infolets, and if you click on them, they have the actual tiles or icons underneath them. Okay, so that's why they're called Infolets, because they have multiple information tiles inside. Okay, the others are regular, so you can have a combination of just the tile and Infolets, and all of these can be altered. Let's say the client or the user is just an employee, a regular employee, then they would not have all of these tasks. So you can align, hide certain tiles that don't apply. Okay, so this whole thing is customizable. Okay, so we've already talked about the personalizing the experience for the user, this background image, logo, and all of that. You can see that this has been personalized. By default, it comes in the Oracle's blue screen with Oracle's logo. And again, this area that you're seeing here, let me take, so if I take a look at this section, so this is the implementation. You can see this is called a conversation box. This is for Oracle Social Network. Now, if a client does not use this, then you can remove this section. So these are not customizations, but these are kind of, they call it role customization, but again, you're not really modifying anything underlying. So all those are, if you do it right, all those are preserved. And with every release, it is becoming more and more robust. Before, I remember in release 9 and so, the whole roles and this role architecture was very complicated, and you could eventually customize a lot of the delivered roles. So when those customers who have customized the delivered roles, even though Oracle has been very clear about the instructions on not to customize the delivered roles, you can make a copy of that role and customize so that it can be preserved for future upgrades. You are getting 2 upgrades, minimum 2 upgrades every year. So we are in release 12 now. So release 12 is coming. So that's 6 years, 12 releases. So the releases are coming very fast, and you can see a lot of changes. It's not just certain enhancement or some nice features. The architecture itself is changing in a lot of ways. So you have to be very careful with your design. So now I would say it's more robust, because the using of the security console, it prevents the implementer from even customizing certain things that should not be customized. But people have customized because that option was available, and some consultants did not pay attention and they customized the delivered role. So they're going to have some difficulties preserving or upgrading to the newer release. So that's going to happen. But now with the new security console, it's more robust, the role customization part especially. So that's going to help for future upgrades for customers, who are getting provisioned in release 11 or 12. Okay. Okay. So any questions so far? Any questions so far? You can either type in your questions or you can unmute yourself and ask the questions. Okay, I am assuming there are no questions so far, so we're going to move forward. So we said that we have got a blank instance, brand new instance you are going to implement in a project. How would you start? Okay, you have logged in, ignore the look and feel for the time being. The first thing that you're going to do is you're going to go to your setup and maintenance style. You need to have the appropriate role. So there will be one admin person who is going to assign the role to you. And the first thing that you're going to do is you are going to configure the offerings. Okay, we're going to talk about these in details. So the offerings are the different modules that you have your client have purchased or have licensed. So you're going to make sure that you are enabling those for your configurations. We will not do it now. We have that as a part of our next chapter. But since we are going into the setup and maintenance page and you are seeing these icons, it is a good exercise to know that these are the offerings that we have. Now let's try to see the different areas that we mentioned, that how to go to the different areas. Okay. Now, one way of going to the different areas is if you have the different URL. But you might not prefer to have different URLs for your one instance, because you can navigate to those URLs from different tasks. Okay. So let me show you. So if we first talk about the OIM, or the Oracle Identity Management area. To access that URL, you can search for something, a task called create implementation user. Okay. Now I know the task by heart because I've been doing it for quite some time now. It's going to take you some time to be familiar with the task, and that's the reason why we have something called an implementation project, which we will cover as a part of today's session. So that will help you to see the different tasks without remembering them. And once you get familiar, you will see that you are using this, you are finding the task rather than going to the implementation project. But let's just focus on the different areas for now. When I search for this task, I have something called create implementation user. Okay. If I click on this, you can see that it is taking me to a different tab, and the login, the main difference is that this OIM, you see this in the URL, it has a different URL than this one. This one has whatever oracle.com/setup, and this one has oracle.com/OIM. So this is a different area. In release 11, I can click on this task and navigate to this OIM where I can create users, I can add the roles to that user, but in release 12, this is gone. This task is still there, but you cannot navigate to this OIM area as an implementer. You have to have some special privileges that I'm yet to find out, how we can get to the OIM in release 12. Okay. So this is the OIM area, and here we can create user accounts. Okay. So you can search for user. We're going to use this user for our practice today. So it comes with the super user or the admin user, who then creates the implementation users for the consultants or the team who was doing the implementation. So that's how Oracle provisions it, with one super user, and then that admin user creates additional users. And then that additional users can also have the capability to create more users. Okay. So this is my OIM area. Okay. I can search any user. I can search all the roles. So there are a lot of delivered roles. So if I search for human, you can see that these are all delivered roles. Okay. Human resource managers, analysts. We're going to talk about the specialities of these roles in the following classes. Okay. So this area is basically to create implementation users and implementation users only. You should use something called role provisioning to create users for employees. So when an employee is created, the users and the employee role should be assigned automatically, and we will see that later when we go into the configurations. So this area should be used primarily for creating the consultant users who would be doing the implementation. Okay. There's a question. Let's take a question here. Would we lose any functionality by not going to OIM in R12? I mean, the idea is that everything that is available in OIM should be available in Security Console. Okay. So even now, if you in release 11, when we go to the Security Console, I can show you that a lot of the things can be done even now in Security Console. In release 12, whatever was missing has been added to the Security Console, and basically the OIM has been shut down pretty much. But I don't think that you're going to lose any of the functionalities that you had in OIM. In OIM, you could create a custom job role, you could create a user, you would assign the roles to your implementation consultant users. All of that can be done in the Security Console. Okay. Okay. What about custom roles created? Yes, custom roles created can be accessed through the Security Console as well. And if you have been using, even if you are using the custom roles, I think starting from release 9 still had some limited capabilities of the Security Console. But in release 10, the Security Console was fairly stabilized. They changed the architecture. In release 11, they changed the architecture again, and in release 12, they have changed the role hierarchy architecture again. So we are not going to talk in depth about roles, but we will briefly cover, but we will show you how the role hierarchy has changed. Custom roles, everything can be searched and modified from the security console. And I think in release 11 or even release 10, nobody was going to the authorization policy manager area to access or customize roles. Everything was being done in the security console as well. Okay. And since we talked so much about security console, I think we should take a look at how the security console looks like. Okay. So to access the security console, this is your navigator. So there are different ways of navigating to the tasks. Say, for example, I want to go to the security console. I have something called tools. So these are the different larger groupings, and underneath that you have the different tasks. So your security console task is under your tools. Okay. So if you go to security console and you need the IT security manager role. So we haven't talked about the roles yet. We will. But since we talked so much about security console, we just thought that we should take a look. Okay. Now you can see that I'm going to look for users. So let me try to look for a user here. It's under, I think it's under the administration tab. Okay, so the user create user functionality is not there in release 11. That's something that what I've seen in Oracle demo is there's a new tab coming where you can do user management. But now what you can do is if you look for employee role, what's happening? I cannot even type. Okay. If I look at the employee role, so this is, if you are comparing this with your PeopleSoft role or your EBS responsibilities, so this is what you are looking at. Okay, you have the role, which is your responsibility, then you have your menus, and then you have your functions that actually launches the forms or the web-based forms or the regular forms. So that's what we have here. The similar concept, we have the role, and underneath that we have the duty roles, application roles, and then finally it will launch. The duties are basically your the forms that's going to be launched. Okay. Again, I don't want to spend time on this one. We will cover this roles and all in the later classes, but just how the security console look like. You can see that if I change this to user, I will know that who all have this role. Okay, you can see this. So these are the users, but actually creating users and assigning roles in release 11 still is housed on the OIM area. When we get release 12, we will see that this can be done in the security console here as well. Okay. So I think we have a fair understanding of the security console at this point, what it is used for. But again, this is some of the advanced topics, so we don't want to deviate much from our agenda. Our idea was to just navigate to the different components. So we talked about the setup and maintenance. We talked about the different modules that the client has. We can navigate to the reporting area by going to the reports and analytics. So we don't have any other tools. All the reports are built within the applications. So if I click on this browse catalog, you can see that this is taking me to this analytics. So this is the BI area where you can define reports. Very similar concept to Oracle Business Intelligence, but that's now as a part of your application. You don't have to have a separate URL for that. You can access all of it from the application. Okay. Okay, so we have seen how to do how to access the setup and maintenance area. We have understood the concept about the Oracle identity management, which is to manage the users, and we know that how it's going to be switched over to Security Console. So one last component that we want to show you is how to do the approvals. Okay, and then here I'm going to show you how the idea of moving everything to the functional setup manager area. Okay, so the task, again, I'm going to go to my setup and maintenance, and here I can search for any task if I know the name of the task. Even if I don't know the full name of the task, I can just do a partial search. So I'm going to say manage approval. Okay, so this is same as going to your AME. Okay, if you are coming from an EBS. So this is where you would go and try to build the approval rules for various processes. Okay. So when I search for manage approval, I see all these tasks. Okay. So I'm interested in two tasks here. One is the manage approval groups for human capital, and the second one is manage approval transactions for human capital. Okay. Now, manage approval transactions for human capital did not even exist until release 9. Okay, so this was the only place for defining your approval processes and rules and whatever. So let me click on this. And again, like I said, it takes you to a completely different URL. And if you're seeing the URL, you can see that it's a different URL than your functional setup manager, correct? Okay. And all your approval rules are within this task called this task configuration. Again, the idea of this session is to get an overall picture of how Fusion is, how the architecture works. So we are seeing different areas. So this is where the different transactions are listed, and you have to go to a specific transactions in order to change the approval rule. So that's how the approval design was there before. And keep in mind, again, I can speak for EBS. In EBS, in AME, you could write PL SQL function. There is no such thing in Fusion. So everything you have to design based on certain attributes. So Oracle is coming up with more and more attributes that you can use to build your condition, and that's your only way of handling approvals. Okay, it definitely has more capabilities than AME has in terms of, if you eliminate the custom function or customization or the PL SQL out of AME, whatever AME can do, Fusion, this is called a BPM, business process management. So this definitely has more capabilities because it has a lot more configuration items. It is more configurable compared to AME alone, minus the function that you can build. But again, if there's anything that you need which is not delivered, you probably won't be able to do it. You can come up with some smart workaround solutions, but you may not be able to meet exactly what the client wants. Okay. Now again, Fusion it's more of you have to design your solution keeping the product in mind, so Fusion already has something. So you have to look at the client's requirement in such a way that you can fit it in Fusion, rather than trying to get the requirement and build solutions. Okay, there will still be some solutioning involved, but keep in mind that you may or may not be able to do everything in Fusion because you cannot build a custom screen, you cannot write custom codes, so you have to design something only with configurations. Okay? No real customizations. Okay? So you have seen this. So this is how the BPM or the approval configuration area looks like. Now I'm going to show you the new area that was designed and built in release 9 with very limited capabilities, and in release 10 and 11 has been significant improvement. Now let me click on manage approval transactions for human capital. Now you can see that I'm still on the same browser. I'm still on the setup, which means that I'm still in FSM area, okay? And I'm only going to see the HR transactions. If I search, I can see that I have different processes. Let's take a look at the termination process. So this is how the termination process is going to behave. Okay. Terminate. Okay. So this is how the terminate process or termination process approval rules are going to work. Okay. So now instead of going to this BPM work list and trying to find, let me try to find this here. That will give you a good analogy between the processes here versus there. Now, this is the terminations approval task. Okay, that's the same task that we are seeing in here. Now, we can configure the task in BPM, or we can configure the task in, this is called the approval transactions UI. Okay, now this is definitely a lot more user friendly. Now let me show you how the process looks like. So if I click on assignees and if I click on go to rule, so this is the termination rule that has been defined. Okay, let's not worry about what kind of rule is there, but let's just take a look at how it looks. Okay, let's see how it looks. Now if you're coming from a completely functional background, like just by looking at these, it's not that intuitive or user friendly, is it? Right? You probably don't get much idea about what is happening. But if I look at this, the same process, look at this. I have a rule. I have saying, oh, if this is the rule, then it is auto approve. If IT department, it does not tell me exactly. I mean, this is something you can click and you can see, how, whatever way you have named it, that if this is for IT department, then you can see here, look at this. If worker's current assignment department starts with IT, just by looking at it, I can make out what's happening here. So that's what I was trying to, refer, that everything is Oracle is trying to move everything into one place, even though there are different architectures, but FSM is going to be the main area for all kinds of configurations. Okay, so that's the objective. So that's what I just wanted to share, that how the approvals used to be before and how it is getting simplified with every release. Now whatever you do in here in the functional setup manager area, everything gets synced real time, because even though everything is happening in functional setup manager area, the architecture has not changed. BPM is not going away. OIM is not going away. APM is not going away. Those data are still housed in these areas. Okay, what is happening is that all kinds of configurations are coming over to FSM, and the synchronization between these different areas are becoming real time. Okay, does that make sense? So the architecture still remains. Whatever I showed you still remains. They are all there. All those components are going to be there. It's just that you will have a much easier time doing the configuration stream from one place rather than navigating to 5 different places. Okay, welcome back everyone from the break. We are going to start now to talk about the functional setup manager. We do have some idea by now because we have already seen the application, but we will do some more in-depth analysis of this particular topic. Now, this is going to be your the heart and soul for any project that you're going to implement. So this is the primary area. It's not really a, I mean, how do we say? It's actually a configuration area. It's not a direct. You won't see a task or anything directly. So it's one large area where you do your configuration. Okay, it comprises of all the different the setup and maintenance that you see. That's the whole thing is the functional setup manager. Okay. Now the functional setup manager provides an end-to-end guided process for managing your functional setup projects throughout the entire implementation lifecycle. Using FSM, you can perform various tasks under an implementation project and also outside the implementation project that we saw. Depending upon the type of implementation, whether it's HCM, compensation, or financials, the project tasks provide a guided flow to all the required setup areas. Now we will see that the difference between how the tasks will differ between an HCM implementation versus a financial implementation. Okay, so we have already sent you the environment link, so you should have it in your email by now. And so wait for me to at least walk you through the application, and then we have a small assignment towards the end where you are going to create your first implementation project in the application. Okay, so this is the guided flow where you can start your configurations. We're going to see how it is done in the applications. The picture is nice, but gets so much easier when we go into the application and see it. Now, before we go to the application, it is important that we understand and familiarize ourselves with the terminology that we're going to use, because after some time I'm going to start using Fusion terms, and the expectation is that you'll be able to relate those terms with the configuration items or what I'm referring to. So first is an offering. So we have already talked about, we have seen that in the application and offering. So that's basically the highest level grouping of the Fusion applications functionality. So an offering is basically, in layman's words, it's the module, okay, that you plan to implement. The modules are divided slightly different compared to EBS or PeopleSoft, and we will see that how it is. We have workforce deployment, compensation, workforce development. So instead of calling it payroll benefits, it's called workforce deployment. It's for core HR. Payroll, benefits, everything is part of workforce deployment. And then we have workforce development, which is for the talent management module. So it's developing your workforce. So that's how they have grouped it. So that's the offering. Okay. Now this offering that we have to enable what offerings are being used for a client, and that is purely depending on the kind of licensing that the client has. So any questions on the offering piece? Or is that clear? And again, I mean, I'm just muted all of you so that we can preserve the quality of the recording. But if you have anything to add, please unmute yourself and you can ask your questions, or you can type it in the chat as well. Okay. So offering is equal to application in EBS. In EBS we used to call it the modules, right? So let's say a client has license for core HR and self-service, but not for payroll. Okay, so that's what it is. So this is the similar thing as what modules that the client has licensed, but it is a little bit higher as higher up the module, because like I said, workforce deployment is an offering, but if you try to relate that in terms of the module, in EBS, so this, let's say, I'm just trying to draw here. So workforce deployment is, let's say, core HR. It also has payroll. It also has benefits. So the client doesn't really have to have, they still need to have a subscription for a specific offering, and then they can use these modules. So the groupings are a little bit at a higher level in Fusion than in EBS. So in EBS, there was no grouping of these three. So the core HR was at the highest level. Payroll was at the highest level. So you have license for payroll or not. You have license for core HR or not. But here they have grouped these on top for workforce deployment. And underneath that, you will see core HR, payroll, benefits. You will see that. And depending on what the client has purchased, you will enable those. We will see what those are called. So those are called options here. So the modules that you relate in core HR, let me take a step back. So the modules that you relate in core HR are going to be the options in Fusion. That's the way you can relate. Okay. So option is the functionality within each offering. And when we go into the application, we will see it. Okay. But that's offering is at the highest level. Workforce deployment is an offering. Options, core HR, payroll, benefit, these are the different options within the offering. And then you have feature where is, whether you want to install the help and any reference common objects. So that's, we will see that the feature part. Like again, this is not something that is very commonly used, but it's a simple thing that we will see in the application. But the most important concepts are the offering and the options. Okay.
Ardip, I have a question.
Yes.
So in PeopleSoft, we have like a payroll is divided into global payroll, North American payroll, and payroll interface. All these three are implemented as a single shot of payroll here.
Global payroll, right now, you have to have the license for global payroll. That covers US payroll. I'm not sure about Mexico or Canada. I don't even know if the product is ready for handling Mexico and Canada payroll at this point. But I know that the elements and all the legislations are there for Canada because I've seen that. But so far what you will see is that payroll is, and you have to enable certain things, but it's from a licensing standpoint, I think it's right now it's only for US payroll.
North American payroll. Okay.
Yes. And,
okay. And what about like time and labor? It's fully implemented, like the product is released?
Time and labor is released. Yes, the time and labor was released, I think, like release 8 or 9 around that time. But it still needs some improvement. That's what I can say. It's not that robust. Not that many customers using time and labor. I mean, it has started picking up, but still a long way to go. Okay, so somebody is asking a question saying payroll is available for India. Yes, it is available for India. Of course it is. But that's just payroll. It depends on where you have taken, like say for example, I mean LC, if you can chip in here in terms of the payroll licensing, it's still wherever you are, if you have the payroll license and if the product is capable of handling the legislations for that specific country, you have it. You don't have to have separate licenses for individual countries, right? LC? Are you on mute?
Hello?
Yes, so they have a question about licensing in terms for the payroll module for different countries. I don't think there's a separate licensing required for countries, right?
No, unless you're doing the payroll itself.
So let's say
But
the company has operations in US and India. They want to run payroll for India and US out of Oracle. Do they have to have separate licensing for that?
I don't think so. Anyways, India payroll is not there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So I mean, India payroll is not there yet, and
Correct.
so yeah. Ajay, to answer your question, it supports India localization, yes, but it does not have the engine built to process payroll for India at this point. I think that's what it is. Like even you run that,
Correct.
correct. Yeah.
You can go to the territory setups, and then you can see where it's available.
Yeah. So that availability is only that you can define the elements with the legislative needs for that country. Correct?
Yeah, if you go to that screen, there's 3 columns. One, it says HR. The other one says payroll interface, and the other one says payroll. So for only the countries that payroll is checked are where you can actually run payroll from Fusion.
Okay, so we can check that once we get to the application. But yes, I mean, yeah, it does support India localization, but let's go to the application and check. I mean, I'm not aware of any client that is running payroll out of Fusion other than the US. So that's something even I need to find out.
No, but Canada is working.
Canada
UK. Yeah, Canada, UK. There's some other countries. You can check there.
Okay. Okay.
On the manage features by, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, we will get there. Okay, thanks, Elsie. Okay, so this is what I was talking about. Is payroll module. No, the payroll module is there. It's like, you can define all the elements. What she's referring to is that the actual processing of the payroll, whether you can run payroll or not. So that part is, we will see for which countries it's available at this point. But like she said, UK, Canada, and US is already there. But when we get to that screen, I will show you what for which countries it's available. Again, there's a difference between, I mean, for India or say UAE or any other country, Australia, you can still define the elements even if you're not using Oracle payroll to run or process the payroll, but those element specific, whatever the legislative needs are there for those elements, that is available for a lot of countries. But we just need to find out where you can process payroll. So just hold on your questions on payroll processing for now. And when we get to that page, we will see. Okay. So this is what I was referring to in terms of offerings and options. Okay. So you can see that your offering is the compensation management again. So compensation management is my offering at the highest level. And these are my different options. You can see that benefits, individual compensation, workforce compensation, total compensation statements. So these are all available as different options within that offering. And you will see that there could be some options that might be available in multiple offerings. Okay, say for example absence management. I know that for sure that it's also available under the workforce deployment offering, because workforce deployment offering is at the core HR module. Okay, so if somebody can implement core HR and absence, so then they will enable this workforce deployment offering, and then they can still use the absence management options within that offering. Okay, so that's, yes.
Benefit, you said it's under workforce deployment, correct? But why
yes,
it is shown under
because like I said, that there are some options that are available under multiple offerings.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
Like say for example, this workforce compensation. that is definitely going to stay only within compensation. You have to have a license for your workforce compensation module in order to use it. But you can use core HR and absence without getting a license for compensation. Okay, so that we will see that how the options and offerings are grouped. Okay.
Okay.
And then you have your implementation project. That so everything is based on a project and task, so you don't have to remember what tasks that you need to complete in order to complete your configuration. So it's very nicely guided. But after some time, you become more familiar with the task names, and then you just switch back and forth between the implementation project and directly finding the task like I was showing you. Okay. So the project has task, and then it also has the scope. So this is how the project looks like. So we have, this is the name of the project, and then you can see that within this, a project must have an offering. So when you're defining a project, you say that what am I going to implement as a part of this project? Is it going to be HR only? Is it going to be HR and compensation, HR, say workforce development, which is talent? So you can have multiple implementation projects defined within the application. But again, if there are tasks, say for example, you want compensation and workforce deployment, which is core HR. So you might see that compensation can use the manage elements task. Workforce deployment, which is core HR, will also use the manage elements task. So you will see that those tasks repeating in each of the offerings. Okay. So again, we can spend time looking at the slide, but it makes more sense to see this in the application. So the slides are good for reference for the future, but I'm going to quickly go past the slides and go to the application. So these are the different roles. This is actually an important piece of information, that every time when you go into an implementation, the first thing that this admin person who has been, once Oracle provisions the environment for the implementation, they will create the implementation users that we talked about, right? They're going to create some implementations user for you. But what roles you need in order to do the configurations? You need application implementation consultant role. That's the most important role that you need, and that basically gives you to the functional setup and maintenance area to perform all the tasks. Okay, so this is a very important role, application implementation consultant. And the user account that we have given you as a part of the hands-on activities, that user of course has more roles, but this is the primary role that has all the tasks that you'll be performing. Okay. Again, this is something for managing implementation projects, not very prominent, not very widely used. Normally, somebody who is the implementation specialist or implementation consultant gets this. Whoever is responsible for adding roles gets IT security manager, which we talked about. So this role allows you to create users in the application. Okay, but for configuration purpose, for consultants, you are unlikely to get the IT security manager because of licensing restrictions on the number of users that you can have. So what you'll be doing is the configurations, and your application consultant role should be sufficient. Okay. Okay. But I just wanted to show you how you can create a user. We already seen the task on how to navigate to this create implementation or OIM area. You can click on this create user task, put the names, password, and user type is going to be consultant. And this is the important role that we just mentioned, that application implementation consultant role is a must-have. By default, when you create a user, this all users role will always come. That's the default role. So even if you have no roles in the application, you can still log in because you have this all user tasks, all user roles. And then for implementers, we need this application implementation consultant. Okay, so we are going to now go to the application. We're going to see how to create, how to view the offerings, options, and then we're going to create implementation project. Okay, so I think we can go to the application now. Okay, so we're going to initiate our discussions on the offerings and options now. We already seen, I just briefly walked through these little icons. So these are the different offerings that Oracle has, okay? And you might see some of those which are obsolete. So if you click on this, just keep your cursor, you can see that it says obsolete because a lot of things have been completely redesigned, okay? So we are not interested in any of these. We are interested in our HCM. It's towards the end. So we have workforce deployment and we have workforce development. Okay. So let's see what's in there under workforce development, deployment. So since it is already configured, you can see that this is already provisioned and enabled. Okay. Now when you first get the application, it's just provisioned. That means Oracle has provisioned this offering for this environment. You enable it for implementation. Okay. Now it's already implemented, it's already enabled, but I will show you how it is done. I mean, please don't change these because that's going to impact the configuration that's in place. So take a look at it, but please do not disable anything. So we talked about workforce deployment, right? So you can see that payroll, absence management, workforce predictions, individual compensation, time and labor, they all come under workforce deployment, okay? So when you are enabling it, you have to enable the top. So you cannot just enable just the top and say, oh, everything else is now automatically enabled, everything else within that. So you also have to enable the lower level options, okay? That's the options part, okay? So you have to enable the offering and the appropriate options that your client is licensed for, okay? So if your client is not licensed for payroll, you will not check this checkbox. And then you have this for the analytics and business intelligence. Most of the clients would have it by default, but you can see that there are certain analytics which is specific to a module. So just make sure that you enable those that's actually licensed for that customer. Any questions here? This is an important step. You cannot just enable everything because that's, if something goes wrong and Oracle comes back and saying that you haven't paid, why did you enable? So you have to be very careful about enabling these.
Deepraj.
Yes.
System will not restrict you from enabling them even though you do not have a license.
Correct.
Is my understanding correct? Okay.
Correct.
Okay, thanks.
But Oracle's legal will not listen to any argument because you're supposed to know what you are enabling for use.
Right. Understand.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. So I'm going to go back. So now so the net changing, so you can also go to the setup and you can see that this is what are the different options. But let me change. Just go back.
Hey, Ardeep, a quick question. Do you get a list of licensed options?
That is not, you don't see it in the applications. If it is provisioned, our licenses opt-in for 3 levels. That is options no, the licenses are primarily at the options level, okay? So licenses are at the options level, not at the function level.
Okay, so you know, like, what are the list of options you are being offered or you're taken?
That is
because
something,
you know, like,
yeah, go ahead.
Yes, you have a list of all the options, right? You can just go on you can enable every option. So is there a problem? That's what I want to know.
Yeah, there is a problem. So that is because that violates Oracle's licensing agreement. If the client has not purchased something, they're not supposed to use it. So it's not that, see, the Oracle cannot restrict access to the certain forms based on the license agreement. It is the customer's responsibility to ensure that they are using those for which they are paid. Like it's even say, for example, like Oracle is selling the licenses and they have a licensing agreement for 10 or say 1,000 employees or 1,000 users. If the client at some point has more than, so when they purchased the license, they had 500 employees. So over a period of time, now they have grown to 1,500 employees. It's their responsibility to inform Oracle to extend the license. The system will not stop them from creating an employee beyond 1,000. So that's the licensing part that's completely is on the client to ensure that they follow the licensing agreements.
And that I agree with you. But my point was, like if I'm going as a consultant, I may not be aware like what the client has bought the licenses. So
you have to
should
be
we
aware of that. You have to be aware of that.
Yeah. So will there be a list of licenses options? That's what I wanted to know.
I mean, that is something you can easily get from the client. So that's.
So we have to make sure we have to have that list before.
Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. So now what we have seen is workforce deployment, right? So now let's take a look at workforce development. What's in there? So let me okay. So you can see that this is for workforce development. You have talent review, succession. So that's this area is primarily for talent management, talent and performance management. So you will find fewer overlaps, right? So you can see the career management, questionnaires, performance, talent review. So that's very much isolated. So that's why you are not seeing any options that belongs to workforce deployment. Let's take a look at compensation. I don't know why it is. I can actually change for the module straight from here and then go to back to offerings. I think the compensation is somewhere in the beginning. Yeah. So this is the compensation. If I go to setup, change configurations. Now you can see that the absence management and benefits are also part of the compensation management. It depends on how the client has licensed. So if they have licensed for compensation with just workforce compensation and not benefits, then you are going to enable only the workforce compensation. Now, since these items are somewhat related, that's the reason why they probably have it grouped. That's why the absence management comes under both compensation and workforce deployment. So because the client can potentially use all features of compensation, including absence, but not core HR. But core HR, like, they can still have PeopleSoft or EBS being their primary system of record. But they can have benefits, compensation, and absence in Fusion. So that's why they have these grouped appropriately. Okay? Because they are related options within the same offering.
Hardeep, so you mean to say we can add these bolt-ons as part of the current PeopleSoft or e-business HCM?
No, I did not get your question.
These options, can we add as a bolt-on?
Yes, yes, absolutely. So that is the coexistence model. So where you still have your EBS or PeopleSoft and you are using a different, like if you're using Fusion for talent and compensation. I mean, of course, there's a significant effort to keep the two systems in sync, but that is a possibility. Yes.
So benefits, we can go ahead.
Yes, like when before, like I think release 8, up to release 8, I think there was no Fusion Payroll. I think release 9 also, I'm not sure if Fusion Payroll was there. I mean, Fusion Payroll was there in release 9, but not very strong. So a lot of clients would not even think of having Fusion Payroll. But if they had EBS, they can use compensation and talent because those two are very strong and stable modules in Fusion, even benefits. So the client might say, okay, we will just use Fusion for talent. So they will send their employee data back and forth between Fusion. So the employee gets created in EBS or PeopleSoft, sent over to Fusion, complete the performance cycle and send back whatever is needed to their either PeopleSoft, EBS or whatever third-party systems that they're using, okay?
Okay.
Okay, so there's a question that says, is it mandatory for the client to upgrade to the latest release? Yes. You cannot win this battle against Oracle of not upgrading. You can push it, you know, if you are going live, you might say, oh, we are already done UAT and we are going live in a month, so we want to go live in that release that we are in, but you cannot be 2 releases behind. If Oracle has released 12, no customer can be on 10. Okay? Everybody has to be in at least 11. Okay. So are we good with the options and offerings?
Yes.
Okay. So now let's talk about implementation project. So same way, if we go to setup and maintenance, which is the functional setup manager area, and this is the button implementation project, and is it necessary to do a regression testing? Yes, absolutely. So there is at least a, so first they are going to upgrade your test environment to the latest release, and you make sure that everything is working, nothing is broken, and then whatever you find, like this is especially for customers coming from very, very older release because the product has changed significantly, especially even the architecture has changed. So like I was telling the example of the role customization. So if somebody has done some serious role customization without following instructions, so those customers, for them, it's an added exercise to, you know, rebuild some of the customizations that they have done. So yes, depending on, you know, how you have followed the instructions and done your due diligence on how to implement, you will have fewer tasks with every upgrade. It is not, supposedly, it should not break anything. That's what Oracle promises, but sometimes it does break some things here and there. But now, definitely, if you have done some kind of customizations that is not recommended by Oracle, there's no guarantee that that's going to be preserved. So that is something, and especially some of the page customizations, if you have done, you make sure that you test. If you have, you know, if you have hidden something, if you have done role customizations, it's definitely very important to test those. But other than that, standard functionalities should not be affected. But yes, you still have that cycle of 2 to 3 weeks at least to do a regression testing. And also it depends on the size of the client. Okay.
Hardeep, you said Fusion is a SaaS model. How we can do the customization in SaaS model?
So customizations in the sense that you can change the page, you can hide fields. So all of those are not really impacting the underlying architecture, that they sit at a metadata level. So those customizations are still preserved because Oracle is not wiping out any changes that you have, because those changes are still residing in a layer above the base application. So that's the kind of customizations that's still going to be preserved. You can create objects, like for example, custom roles. Oracle has the delivered employee role. You can make a copy of that employee role. Oracle knows that that copy is not provided by Oracle. It's not going to do anything to that object. But if any changes happens to the delivered employee role, and if there's any change happening, then that gets impacted on the Oracle delivered, but it does not touch anything that you have changed on a copied version of that. But if you have started modifying the delivered employee role, which you could in older releases, then that's gone. I mean, that may or may not be gone. I mean, depending on what kind of changes Oracle is bringing. But no, PAS is completely different. So that is different. No, those will not have any impact on the upgrades. Okay. So now, once we have done that, we can assign this project. So by default, it is assigned to HCM user, is basically the user that is logged in. And there's not much significance in who you assign it to. This is the creation of the project is just to guide you through the setup tasks. Okay, so that's the primary purpose of this. Doesn't matter who you assign it to. It's all those are the bells and whistles for tracking who did what, who is doing how much progress, but those are just manual. So there's no significance as such, no implications on who you assign it to. Doesn't matter that if this project is assigned to IMPL admin, somebody else cannot do it. So anybody can access the tasks, because at the end of the day, when you perform the task, when you perform the task of creating a new department, creating a new job, they all get stored in the same database. So it's not compartmentalized. So that this is being created as a part of this project, so it means it only remains within this project. It's not like that. This is just for tracking. Okay. So you can assign it to anybody else, but just keep it to HCM user the way it is. By default, the start date is the system date. Don't worry about those. Click next. And here you will see all the modules, or in Fusion words, all the offerings. So by now we should be familiar. All the offerings that is available in this environment. Okay. Now for this exercise, we are doing core HR. So we will only keep workforce deployment as a part of our setup tasks for this project. Okay. Now we have to click on include. And like I said, we not only have to include the top level, we will also have to include the individual options within an offering. Okay. So just for core HR purpose, we can say workforce management. That is something that we want to keep. We want to keep profiles. We want to keep workforce scheduling. And there should be something for the BI. We can do the BI piece. So workforce deployment, intelligence. And the reason I'm doing this is to ensure that when you do it in your actual project, you are not just including everything. You are following the instructions based on the licensing agreements. Okay, so if you have, the client has payroll license, then you can do the payroll business intelligence. If the client has payroll license, then you can check the payroll offering, payroll options, and all that. Okay. Now what it will do is that it will only show you the tasks. It will build the tasks for you based on what is needed for this implementation, for core HR only. Okay. Okay. So any questions? If the project start date is today, can we create workforce structures back? Yes, like I said, this is only to track the progress of the work that you're doing in the application. It has nothing to do with the actual configurations you're doing. Okay, you can do the entire implementation without even creating an implementation project. Okay, so but this is definitely a very useful start. But if it is payroll module, if you are using the payroll module, some of the tasks you have to access from the project. I'm going to show you some of the tasks that you cannot do from the you cannot do it directly from the task that we were searching. Do you need payroll? Yes, go ahead.
Can you please go back and start again? I missed some of the things like selecting the offering statement.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. So I haven't submitted it actually, so it's still there. So this is so you mean at the project, starting with the project?
Yeah, yes, that's right, after the project. Yeah.
Okay, so you put the name, you get next, and then what I have selected for global HR is its workforce deployment. That covers my core HR. So I have included this offering, workforce deployment offering, and then I have used workforce scheduling. Then the most important piece is the workforce management and workforce profiles. These are the primary tasks that we will configure as a part of this training. There was a question from Jorge saying, do we need to check the payroll options to configure elements? Like I said, if you have application implementation consultant role, you have access to the task called manage elements. So yes, you can create elements even if you do not have the payroll checkbox checked. But I think with this payroll checkbox checked, you have some payroll specific tasks like tax reporting unit, configurations, the calculation cards. Those tasks will not be there as a part of the project. But keep in mind, all of those tasks are available to you directly from the setup and maintenance area. But like I said, some payroll tasks you have to perform from the project. So if you're not implementing payroll, then you don't need to have the payroll checkbox checked because you can still create elements and you can still proceed with the necessary configurations that you need to perform. Okay. And again, there are some fine lines here, so you can, if you're not absolutely certain on certain offerings, you can always check with Oracle to say, this is the configurations or the tasks that we are missing. Can we include this? That's always something that you can verify. But again, just don't blindly include everything without knowing the impacts. So that's something that you should consider before you do that. That's the reason I wanted to, stress this part. So once you have done that, click on Save and Open Project. Okay. So once I click on Save and Open Project, I can see that this is showing me the workforce deployment, and underneath that, it is giving me all the necessary tasks nicely grouped in the order in which they need to be performed for this implementation. Okay, so that is the importance of creating an implementation project. Now this status, you can see that not started, nothing gets changed automatically. That you finish all the common configurations that you have. If you expand this, you can see that you need to define synchronization, implementation user, geography. Doesn't matter that you complete this task, that you run this process, whatever it's asking you to do, that will not change the status automatically. You need to change the status after you complete, either in progress, completed, but to be honest, no one keeps, there are very few people who really keep track of the statuses. So you create the projects initially to help you guide the steps, because you're coming from PeopleSoft, you're coming from EBS, you're not sure which tasks to perform first, in what sequence that you need to perform. So this tells you, okay, you need to first run the user and role synchronization process before you can do anything. Now, that is something that you complete. Are the tasks listed according to logically? Yes, they're all logically sequenced. Okay. Again, but that does not mean that you will not be able to perform a task in a different order. I can create a department, or I can create, like let's say I do not have payroll. This geography task is going to load my vertex data into the tables so that I can use the list of values for job for my city, state, county, zip code. Okay. If I do not, so I can just say, okay, let me start with this first. Yes, I can always do that. But this is the standard sequence that it's good to follow, because if you think that first you need to run the users and role synchronization process, then you need to define the implementation users. Now here we already have an implementation user, so we don't need to create anything. Then we need to create the data role for the implementation user. We will talk about that later. We need to assign the roles. First we need to create user, then we need to create any additional roles needed. Then we need to assign the roles to users so somebody else can also help me in this project. Then we need to run the geography so that I can use that in my location. Okay, so that's the importance of the sequence. And like I said, everything has to be manually tracked after you complete, so no one really tracks them. Okay, but if you track it, it's good for you.